Phantom John, number 13, of The Raven, Revenge, and the Reckoning. Mara found the note 2 days after I left. Lying on the sink in the wash house, weighted down. The handwriting was neat, like a man who didn't want to leave a mess. She didn't say anything, she just read it. Mara, I didn't mean to stay as long as I did. Thank you for the food and the roof. This was the first time in a long time that I've lived with people. I think I'm seeing what keeps the wolves away. Killian. She folded it once and slipped it into her apron pocket. Then she stood on the porch and looked west. Not a living thing in sight, just the smell of coming heat. I had been riding since just after sunrise. The land stretched wide and silent, green in patches, dry in others. Fences sagged. Windmills didn't turn. I passed 2 empty fields and a bone-picked carcass, hide stretched tight as rawhide over ribs. I didn't know where I was going, only that it wasn't back. I thought about Donnelly and Alfred, both still breathing. I'd stood within 10 feet of them. Could have done it clean. Could have ended it. But something had changed since I left Julie's grave, since the time I spent with Mara and Lottie. Something was different, and when the moment came, my hand stayed. By noon, I saw a small ranch house off the road, weather-stained porch, 1 chair, no stock in the corral. A woman stepped out when I rode up, drying her hands on a faded cloth. She looked tired, but not afraid. "You hungry?" she asked. I nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't ask my name. I didn't offer it. She made coffee and beans, and I ate on the porch with a tin fork, said thank you. Got back on the gelding and kept moving east. Late afternoon. The prairie had flattened out, stretching east like a green ocean with no shore. The wind ran low along the ground, dry and steady. Something about it reminded me of the Staked Plains in Texas. That big, wide-open country, as far as the eye could see. It was like putting out to sea. You better know how to navigate, or you were getting lost in those grasslands. The Grula gelding was swinging along in an easy trot. The late afternoon sun was low when I spotted a moving silhouette. Far ahead, maybe a mile, a man riding up the hogback of a ridge, black against the sky, big black horse, heavy built. As I closed the distance, the details sharpened. Flat-brimmed hat, old Mexican vaquero rig, plenty of silver on the saddle. I could see the sun reflecting off the conchos. At 200 yards, the rider stopped, turned his horse crosswise on the ridge, one hand resting on the saddle horn. Then he just waited. I could tell this was the kind of man that didn't get caught flat-footed much. He made damn sure anything that happened on his terms. I could see his silhouette against the setting sun clearly, and he didn't move. Just waited. I slowed the gelding, glanced down at my rifle. Just wanted to make sure it was clear, ready for action. The air smelled thick and stifling. When I was close enough to see the man's eyes, gray, sharp, set deep, I pulled up. The man spoke first. His voice was low and level, seemed like the type that was never in a hurry. "Hello, stranger." I studied him. Stubble under the chin, deep lines at the mouth. Looked maybe 10 years older than me, the kind of man you didn't size up quick. "Just minding my own business, passing through," I replied. The man tipped his hat just enough to acknowledge it. "Name's Phantom John, or at least that's what folks been calling me. You don't look lost, but you damn sure don't look found either." Something that could be mistook for a smile played at the corner of my mouth. John looked at me a second longer, then gestured toward a narrow cut below the ridge. "I'm about to make camp. You're welcome to join me. Firewood's plentiful. Shade, too. You look like a man carrying too much to ride through the night." He paused, then added, "Besides, it might be nice to have some company. I'm always looking for someone I can give a word of advice to, and if there's one thing Phantom John's never short on, it's advice. What do you say?" I didn't smile back, but I touched the brim of my hat. "I'll ride down." Phantom John didn't move right away. He just looked off down the ridge. Then he pointed with his chin. "You see that deer? About 600 yards out, maybe a little less." I squinted. Took me a second, but there it was, head down, standing half-shadowed in the brush. Phantom swung a leg off the big black horse, reached into the long scabbard, and pulled out that Whitworth. The barrel flashed as it caught the evening sun. "Hope you ain't got your heart set on only trail biscuits tonight," he muttered. "I need meat." He walked a few paces to a flat stretch of earth, laying his folded coat on top of a low rock. Then he laid down and slid the Whitworth up across. "You won't hit that shot." I said, skeptical. Not at that range. John didn't answer. He just settled in, let out a breath, and squeezed. The crack echoed slow and low, like it had come from another hilltop. The deer jolted once, then crumpled, stone dead. John stood and dusted off his coat like it was nothing. "You coming?" he asked. "Camp will be better with meat on the fire." The campsite sat in a low draw, half sheltered by a rock face and a stand of young aspen. Someone had camped there before. A circle of stones still blackened. Dry limbs stacked beside it like someone had cut and left them for the next soul that passed through. John dismounted first. His black horse stood still as a statue. He loosened the girth and began to unsaddle slow, setting the rig down against a boulder. I noticed his rifle, the one hanging from the pommel, a lever-action Henry 44. He also had a big, heavy, long gun in a scabbard, the Whitworth. Not many of those around anymore. Once you heard one fire, you never forgot it. There was no mistaking a Whitworth rifle. It sounded like the scream of an eagle when it came whistling toward you. That 8-sided bullet had an odd whine. I followed suit. The Grula was tired, still soft compared to Buck. He'd never had any hard riding on him, just running loose in the Box Canyon until last fall when he was brought in and broke to ride. I could feel it in the way he breathed. Steady and deep, head hanging low. I glanced again over at Phantom John's pistol rig. I saw an old brass-framed cap and ball revolver. "Why you still carry that thing?" I said, pointing at the gun. Phantom John just chuckled. "An old Schalken McClanahan," he said. "Made back during the war. Hard to find 'em. 36 caliber. This old gun shoots as fast as lightning, though it does load a mite slow." We worked in silence, both of us used to it. Phantom John built the fire without a word. He used flint and steel, lit dry moss, tucked in old bark. When it caught, he sat back on his heels like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. I took a seat near the edge of the ring, not too close. John reached into his saddlebag, pulled out 2 tins, beans and coffee, then reached back for a butcher knife. Set the coffee to boil, opened the beans with the tip of a skinning knife, then opened the other can of peaches. "You ride alone long?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I muttered. "Been riding alone for a while." John nodded, like he understood, like that answer was a good one. We didn't talk for a while, just the snap of the fire and the distant call of a bird, too tired to care where the sun was falling. I watched the fire dance on the barrel of the Whitworth where it lay across the man's legs. Phantom John saw me look. "You know what that is, son?" I grunted. "Yeah, I've seen a few. That's one of them rifles you can lay up on a ridge and shoot a man in the next state." Phantom John laughed. "I've had a few shots over the years that reached out close to the state line. That worked out pretty well for me." Phantom John finally poured the coffee. One for each. "You ever talk in your sleep, Killian?" I didn't answer. John smiled slow, like he'd heard the silence before. "Don't worry," he said, handing over the cup. "I ain't the kind to hold a man's dreams against him. I just asked because you'll probably hear me talking in mine. I let men know beforehand." He took a slow sip of coffee, grimaced, then laughed. "Damn stuff tastes like it was filtered through a saddle blanket." The meat was done, and Phantom John took it off the fire and set it on a rock to cool. He leaned back against a sage bush, boots crossed, Whitworth not more than a reach away. "You mind if I talk a bit?" he asked, eyes half closed but sharp as a buzzard's. "I find it helps me digest." I gave a faint nod. John's voice drifted easy, like a man riding downhill. "I took a contract a while back. Texas Rangers, mostly just for the excuse to ride. They wanted someone to track down a vaquero named Henry Herbert Alvarez. You ever hear that name?" I shook my head. "Don't matter," John said. "Most men like that burn fast and loud. Alvarez burns quiet, the kind that smiles when he cuts and never hurries. I've been following his shadow for near 2 months now. Damn near every saloon he passes through leaves one less mouth breathing and one more rumor hanging in the rafters." He stopped. "Let the fire crackle. But I didn't come out here just for Alvarez," he added. "Truth is, I'm a philosopher by nature, a man who herds words like cattle. Ain't always productive, but it keeps the wolves off my conscience." He tipped his tin toward me. "Especially when I run into a young fellow like you, and I can give him a word of advice." He looked over the rim of his cup, eyes glinting with humor and something older. "I think any man who works more than he thinks is an idiot." I smiled, just barely. I was starting to like this man. John caught it, chuckled. Then he went quiet. Finally, he said, "Son, I don't mean to meddle in another man's business, but you look like a man searching for a road. One you don't know the name of, don't know where it leads, but you're damn sure looking." He let that hang. Didn't press. Just drank his coffee, set the cup down slow, and leaned back against the rock. The silence spread out between us like frost off frozen water on a winter morning. I didn't answer right away. I just stared into the fire. Just sat there, the wind tugging lightly at my coat. There was something about Phantom John. The way he spoke plain. The way he didn't fill the silence like most men did. I knew. You didn't buffalo a man like that. You didn't talk circles. No use leaving out the worst parts. This was the kind of man you talked to straight. So I started talking. Not easy at first. Truth leaking out slow, like it hadn't seen daylight in years. I told him about July, the first time I met her. I told about the first man I killed when I was 18 years old, and then a few years later the second. How Julie and I had gotten married. I told about the day she died, the accident, how it was my fault, and my 5 years of hunting McGregor, carrying bitterness and hate in my heart till it near killed me. Thinking that if I killed McGregor, I'd finally know peace. But it didn't bring me no peace, just nightmares. Dreams where I'd wake up sweating in the middle of choking the life out of McGregor with my bare hands, or hearing the scream out in the hills, and the raven calling, then the sound of the wolves chasing, and the realization that I wasn't going to get there in time. Dreams you couldn't go back to sleep after you woke from. And Phantom John? He didn't interrupt, didn't nod, didn't say I understand. He just listened, like it was his job, like that was what he was here on Earth to do. I told how I had decided not to kill Alfred and Donnelly the day before, and had finally gone on after a hard-thought decision. I told him of Mara and Lottie riding colts, and how it was the first time I'd been with people in a long time. When I finally quit, there was a long stretch of silence. Phantom John just sat there, smoking his pipe. A big pipe. Looked like he'd made it himself. Must have taken half a bag of tobacco to stuff that thing. And as the smoke billowed up through the trees, Phantom John had a look in his eye, like he was remembering way back. A long time ago. Maybe a lifetime or two. I wasn't sure. But I just waited. And then Phantom John began to speak. Phantom John tapped the bowl of his pipe with one thick finger, tamped the leaf down, and struck a wooden match off the heel of his boot. He looked at me. "Yeah, I've got matches," he said. "If you noticed, I used flint and steel to start that campfire. I do that to keep myself sharp so I don't forget the old ways." The flame flared. The fire caught slow. He puffed, then drew deep. Smoke rolled out of his mouth like it had been waiting years to escape. He didn't look at me when he finally spoke, just kept his eyes half on the fire, half on the dark past beyond it. "You ever try to raise a wolf pup?" he said quietly. I didn't answer. John continued anyway. "Had one once. Found it near the Pecos, ribs showing, eyes too big for its head. Thought maybe I could make it gentle. Fed it from my hand, kept it near the fire, got to where it lay at my feet, let me scratch behind the ears." He paused, drew again. "One night, it bit me. Pure reaction. I'd leaned too close with food, and something deep in it, some memory older than language, came out. Teeth first. Cut clean through the skin down to the bone." He looked down at his hand like he could still see the scar. "I didn't shoot him, or chain him up either. I just let him go. 'Cause I finally understood, some things weren't meant to live close to men. Doesn't mean they're bad. Just means they're carrying something we can't fix." He turned and met my eyes. "You've got that look, son. Like a man who tried to raise something in himself. Something wild and rough. Thought maybe it could be trained. Thought maybe the killing would quiet it, or the leaving would bury it. But it didn't, did it?" I said nothing. Phantom John puffed again, slow and patient, letting the smoke drift upward. "There's men out there who were born for mercy," he said. "They make good fathers, honest farmers. They don't ask too many questions, and the world treats them fair most days. But men like you and I, we ask too many questions. We see too much, feel too much, and we don't lie to ourselves. Folks are kind of like mirrors. We see ourselves in them. And generally, the world ain't ready for that." Then he tipped his pipe toward me. "You didn't kill Alfred and Donnelly," he said, "'cause somewhere in you, the wolf laid down. Might not have licked your hand, but it didn't bite either. Then, for the first time since we met, John smiled. Not wide, not warm, but real. And as for that girl and her mother, maybe you think you don't belong there, because every time you look inside, you see the wolf, the one with his teeth bared, ready to snap at any hand that comes toward him, whether to do harm or good. He tapped out his pipe on a stone, watching the sparks scatter like fireflies. I don't know if that's where you're meant to stay, but just don't let that wolf inside you give you your walking orders. He shifted his weight, and the firelight touched the lines on his face. That's all I've got for tonight. I ain't in the habit of sermonizing, but I've seen enough men run from their own redemption to know it when I smell it in the smoke. He stood and stretched, joints creaking like old hinges. I'll be riding west in the morning, back on Alvarez's trail. But you? He looked down at me one last time, the firelight catching something faint behind his eyes. Son, you're at a fork in the road. You go one way and you'll be lost like a ghost in the hills. But you go the right way, you might learn to live again before the world forgets who you are. Make your choice wisely, son, 'cause the thing about running is you always take yourself with you. I glanced up quick. Then Phantom walked off into the dark a few paces, found a flat patch near the mesquite, and laid down without another word. I sat there by the fire, staring at the coals. Deep thought. I thought of everything Phantom had said. I saw things clear now. I saw the fork in the road, right where I was standing. I saw how my own pride was always standing in my way. I saw how being alone all the time had made me angry. Just listening to Phantom speak made me realize how talking made things settle in my mind. Not that I was particularly fond of it, but I reckoned it was good to have somebody to talk to. And then, without thinking, I called out, "Hey, Phantom, you still awake?" "I'm awake," came the reply. "You know we talked about the fork in the road. Would you mind if I rode with you for a day or two?" I couldn't believe I had asked. It was not like me to ever impose on someone else. Phantom John rolled over in his blankets and made sure the little smile on his face wasn't visible to me. "Sure, son. You can ride along with me. I'm getting up there in years. If I run into Alvarez, I could maybe use a little backup anyway." I felt just a breath of relief, and then Phantom went on. "We'll get up in the morning, eat some breakfast, and we'll head out. No sense in rushing it. Old Alvarez ain't getting away, not once he's got Phantom John on his trail. And you, I got a feeling you're a man to ride the river with. A man that ain't scared to fight." And then Phantom John turned over in his blankets, grinning to himself. I stayed up a while after Phantom John turned in. The fire had burned low, just red coals now, enough to see by, but not enough to chase off the chill. I sat there with my hands wrapped around the tin cup, the last of the coffee long gone cold. I wasn't thinking, not exactly. Just watching the glow settle into ash and letting what had been said soak in like rain on hard ground. At some point, the coyotes began to sing. I didn't lift my head, didn't move at all. By morning, the sky was pale and wide and waiting. Dew clung to the sage. The breeze was clean. John was already up, humming something tuneless as he stirred a pan of beans over the fire. I came over and took the coffee off before it boiled over. Neither of us said good morning. We didn't need to. After we ate, we saddled in silence. The only sound was the creak of leather and the soft jangle of gear. Phantom John cinched down the saddle on that big black Frisian, then gave the rifle a light tap before sliding it into the scabbard. I climbed up without a word, boots settling into the stirrups like they'd never left. John looked over at me, squinting against the light. "You sure you want to come?" he asked. "Might not be an easy trail." I adjusted the reins, glanced east. I ain't looking for easy. John nodded like he'd expected that. All right then. One trail fading behind us, another waiting ahead. And as the sun broke full over the ridge, we rode out together. Shadows long behind us, the day just beginning to burn.